You're listening to the Murder Files, featuring stories of the murdered and the missing with Buffy Gunner, journalist for Illicit Deeds. Murder File 14 covers the story of 8-year-old Hiawayi Robinson. I will also be highlighting the disappearance of 18-month-old Amir Jennings. But first, let's get started with our This Just In segment. In Chicago, Illinois, a 16-year-old boy charged with fatally shooting a 22-year-old mother of two and seriously hurting her older sister was already being investigated in an attack on the sister when he was arrested. Prosecutors said that on Wednesday. 16-year-old Roberto Jimenez was taken into custody Monday and charged with first-degree murder in the August 24th killing of 22-year-old Jezebel Perez. Jimenez also faces 2 counts of aggravated battery in the shooting of Perez's 24-year-old sister, once on August 7th and again on August 24th. The two had been involved in a relationship. On August 7th, Jimenez shot the sister after she approached his new girlfriend's car to confront her about a Facebook post. She identified Jimenez and the new girlfriend in a photo array, and the shooting was under investigation at the time of the August 24th attack. That night, Perez was driving with his sister and 2 young daughters when they saw Jimenez and his new girlfriend parked in front of a smoke shop on 26th Street. Perez stopped her car and began arguing with Jimenez and his girlfriend about the previous shooting. Perez threw a cup of water at the girlfriend's car and drove away, then stopped in a nearby parking lot to see if she had a small baseball bat in her trunk, but could not find it. Soon afterward, the 2 cars meet again in the alley near the 2700 block of South Holman Avenue, prosecutors said. Perez got out of her car and began banging on the driver's side window of the girlfriend's car. Jimenez and another person in the car got out and walked to a nearby tow lot where Jimenez's gang was known to store firearms. Jimenez returned to the car and began shooting at Perez, hitting her 4 times. She was taken to Mount Sinai Hospital and she was pronounced dead. She leaves behind 2 daughters, 1 and 4 years old, according to a GoFundMe page started by the Perez family. Perez's sister tried to get behind the wheel and drive away with the 2 young children, but Jimenez began to run at her. Perez's sister jumped out the car and started to run down 28th Street when Perez opened fire, hitting her twice. A judge on Wednesday ordered Jimenez to be held without bail. He was set to begin his sophomore year in high school this fall. Jimenez is scheduled to appear in court again on September 19th. Now, down in Memphis, Tennessee, a pair of suspects are on the run after police say they robbed and kidnapped a woman and her 1-year-old son. Memphis police said officers responded to the incident at Target on U.S. Highway 64 around Wednesday. The victim told police her 1-year-old son was in a shopping cart while she was putting groceries in her car when an unarmed man got out the goldish tan colored vehicle, pointed a gun at her, and he demanded cash. Police said he told the man she didn't have any cash on her and just to take her wallet and cards and give him the PIN number to one of her cards. That's when investigators say the suspect grabbed the 1-year-old out of the cart and forced the woman to get into the front seat of the car at gunpoint. The armed suspect then sat in the back seat with her child. The driver was not armed. The suspects went to the drive-through ATM at Regions Bank on Stage Road. The driver withdrew $800, took the victims back to Target, and made them get out of the car. Police said the armed suspect wiped off the victim's debit card that was used before throwing it back into her purse. The suspects then left the store with the woman's wallet. The woman ran into the store and alerted a staff member who called police. The victim said no shots were fired and no one was injured during the incident. Memphis police have released photos of the suspects. You can view that on their website. If you have any information, call Crime Stoppers at 901-528-CASH. Again, that's 901-528-CASH. Now, swinging on over to Detroit, Michigan, a 19-year-old man was charged Wednesday with first-degree murder in a series of apparently random shootings over roughly 2 hours last weekend in Detroit that left 3 people dead and a fourth wounded. 19-year-old Dante Ramon Smith was arraigned later in the day in the 36th District Court on the 3 murder counts as well as other counts, including assault and firearms charges. In ordering Smith held being held without bond, mag- magistrate Jeffrey, I think it's Kleparik, said he found him to be a danger to the community and had concerns about his mental health. It is not an overstatement to say that on Sunday morning, this defendant rained real terror on the citizens of Northwest Detroit. Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy said in a statement while announcing charges. Normal everyday life was brought to a standstill as he moved east to his next victim. Police spent 12 hours searching for the man and peacefully arrested him Sunday at his home following a tip from someone close to him. Police said a gun was found that matched shell casings at the shooting scenes. Detroit Police Chief James White said the man may have a mental illness and terrorized our community. Mayor Mike Duggan said that the man may have been emboldened after not encountering officers following the first shooting after about 4:45 a.m. Sunday when a 28-year-old man was slain less than 2 miles from the police station. At that early hour, no calls were made to 911, Duggan said. The prosecutor office said police found the man's body in a doorway of a church. About 30 minutes later, someone called 911 after finding a woman shot about 3 blocks away from the first shooting. She has not been identified yet. Another woman, Laurie Briscoe, a 43-year-old single mother of 5 children, was waiting nearby for a city bus when she was shot multiple times. Both women died. Then, about 7:10 a.m., a 76-year-old John Palik was shot in the leg while walking his dog. The dog was shot in the paw. Both survived. Wallace Pleasant said an armed bystander saw a fourth shooting and fired his own weapon at the suspect, who then fled. That concludes our Just In section for this episode. I'll be right back with murder file number 14. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. This episode of murder file number 14 is about a little 8-year-old girl from Prichard, Alabama. She was murdered, she was raped, and it was all at the hands of her father. I originally ran across this story when I was watching the ID channel. I was watching See No Evil. And oh my God, it was just so sad. I cried, I cried, I cried. But I wanted to do this story today because I was having a conversation with someone not too long ago, and they don't believe that fathers actually do these types of things. So I just wanted to tell her story so I can open up people's eyes to what really happens in the real world. Everything is not always peaches and cream, unfortunately. And unfortunately, this little girl had to find out the hard way herself. But going on with the story, on September 16th, 2014, Hawaii was at her grandmother's house. And while she was at her grandmother's house, she received a phone call. Now, when I was watching See No Evil, they didn't mention who called, but she did say that she wanted to go down to her cousin's house because her cousin stayed in the same building. And from what her mother said and her sister said, she always went there to play with her cousin's little girl. So in my mind, it was the cousin that was calling her, asking her to come down. And her grandmother told her it was okay, of course. She was at her grandmother's house because her mother worked as a nursing assistant, and I believe she worked like either overnight or stayed late night. But that's who watched Hawaii when her mother had to work. So she went down to the cousin's house. And later on, I'm not sure how long it was when her sister came home, But her sister asked her grandmother's like, "Hey, where's Hawaii?" And she was like, "Go get her. Go to your cousin's house, and go get her from downstairs." Well, her sister came back and she told her grandmother that no one was there, and she called the cousin, and the cousin said she haven't been there all day. She actually been at the hospital. She haven't talked to Hawaii. So now they're panicking, trying to figure out where she's at. They're looking for her. So they ended up calling the mom. They called the father. And when everyone gets there, including the police, they said the father was going crazy and doing the blame game. And for me, that already took up red flags because why are you blaming anyone? You supposedly have no idea what happened. Anything can happen. Obviously, nothing has happened to this little girl before, so her parent, her grandmother, her mother must not be incompetent. But they couldn't find her. So some time goes by, they still don't find this little girl. The police went and they started pulling surveillance footage from businesses around the area. Well, they pulled surveillance footage from the store and found out the little girl was there, but they couldn't figure out who she was there with. She was there for a little while. She bought something, then I think she bought like either some kind of chocolate, put it in the refrigerator so it could get in a little refrigerator that the store have where they keep their ice creams to keep it cold. And she talked to a few people, but they still couldn't figure out who she was with. So they got their hands on a different footage from a different business, and figured out that they seen what looks like her father's truck driving down a street, and looks like it came into that parking lot. So they couldn't really tell that that was him, but they had their theory. So they went on and they ended up finding the little girl 2 days later. They found her in a trash pile in Prichard, where her father used to work. They said she was partially naked and this baby had been sodomized and suffocated to death. That's what her father did. Sodomized her and then suffocated her. And of course, it was a shock to family. It was a shock to the community because this man stood there and acted like he was just father of the year. He played the role of the biggest grieving father ever. He gave TV interviews where he demanded justice and everything. So, however, the police became suspicious of Robinson because I'm not sure if I mentioned what her daddy name was, but his name is Hiawayi Robinson. But the police became suspicious of him, and when they began to find holes in his story, they started searching. So, despite his claim that he never made contact with his daughter, surveillance footage from the different businesses I told you about showed them together buying candy. Then, investigators discovered various items of Hawaii's clothing in Robinson's car. They found duct tape, a hair bead at the crime scene that also matched the duct tape and a hair bead that was found at the crime scene. The tape and the bead was found in his car. Semen was found on Hawaii's t-shirt, but it was never connected her to her father. Now, Hiawayi Robinson was eventually sentenced to 100 years for the brutal crime. He continued to maintain his innocence and argue with the judge throughout his sentence hearing. He told the judge, I won't apologize for something I didn't do." Then he said, when he was sentenced to the 100 years, he said, "That's right. That's all right. I'll be back." And investigators now believe that he had been sexually assaulting Hawaii on multiple occasions prior to that, and I'm sure he was. And unfortunately, I, I wish he would have said something. I know it's hard, and I can't speak from experience or anything, but I could just imagine how she felt and she probably was just scared. Um, he did try to appeal his case in 2019, but he ended up losing the appeal to the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals. Another way that they found out it was him, it was more surveillance video. So, come to find out, the girlfriend he was staying with, she had cameras in her home and outside her home. And the night that Hawaii went missing, he actually had came home that night, and he was like basically taking off his clothes before he even into the damn house, and he went straight to the laundry room and started washing clothes, and then he went to his truck and started cleaning out his truck. Like, who does that? And I think that was the biggest thing that really put him away, because what are you doing, bro? Other than, the evidence from the actual crime scene. So yeah, there's a lot of stories like this, unfortunately, and I really hate that this had to happen to a wife. She was such a beautiful little girl, but I really hope she rests in peace. I'm glad she got her justice. A lot of people don't get justice. I'm glad she got hers. But that's the end of this story. We're gonna go ahead and go to a little short break, and we'll be back with our featured missing person. This week's featured missing person is Amir Jennings. This little boy has been missing since November 22nd, 2011, from Columbia, South Carolina. He's actually considered endangered missing. Today he will be 12 years old, so he went missing when he was 1. Now, since we don't have any information about how he would look right now, of course, I can only give you details of how he looked when he was 1 year old. So his height was 2 feet 2 inches tall, and he weighed 25 pounds. He was last seen in a black bomber jacket and black caseless sneakers, and he was with his mother. Her name is Zinah Jennings. She was missing as well, but we'll get to that. She was found, of course. They were last seen in a burgundy 2004 Dodge Neon, and he is described as a black boy with black hair, brown eyes. At the time of his disappearance, Amir had 4 to 6 teeth, with a gap between his upper front teeth, and his nickname is Mir. From what I understand, Zanaya's mother, which is Amir's grandmother, is who reported them missing um, initially. And he disappeared, like, it was right, what was that, right after Thanksgiving? This was November 22nd, so yeah, right after Thanksgiving. But let's go ahead and get to the story. Amir and his 22-year-old mother, she was 22 at the time, Zinah Jennings, disappeared from Columbia, South Carolina on November 22nd, 2011. They were reported missing by Zanaya's mother, Jocelyn Jennings Nelson, in early December, after she found out Zinaya was a suspect in a hit-and-run accident. Nelson had thought Amir and Zinaya were in Atlanta, but when she asked about her grandson, she only got vague answers. On December 24th, Zinaya was located after she crashed her burgundy 2004 Dodge Neon at Millwood Avenue and Lady Street in Columbia near her mother's home. However, her son wasn't with her at the time. When asked about Amir, Zinaya at first claimed she didn't have any children, then admitted Amir was her son and said he was staying with friends and relatives at various places, but she refused to give any further information about him. On December 29th, she was charged with child neglect because she wouldn't produce Amir or say where he was or what had even happened to him. Cadaver dogs indicated the scent of human remains inside Zanaya's car trunk and back seat, and authorities had found a blood-stained baby blanket in the trunk. The blood was found to be Amir's. A shovel and some of Amir's clothing were also in the car. Nelson stated Zinah had been a good student at Winthrop University, but after Amir's birth, she struggled with depression and started acting erratically. She has been diagnosed with schizophrenia and prescribed antipsychotic medication. Amir's father had little contact with him, although he did see his son and Zinah over the Thanksgiving holiday in 2011. Besides his mother, Amir's father was the last person to have seen him. On November 9th, not long before Amir disappeared, Zinah was arrested for prostitution and marijuana possession in Atlanta. She had been staying there with her half sister, excuse me. Zinah frequently traveled between Columbia, Atlanta, and Charlotte, North Carolina, and she had friends in all those places. She was pregnant at the time of her arrest, and in September 2012, during her trial for unlawful conduct towards a child, she gave birth to a daughter, a little girl. Prosecution witnesses testified that Zinah had physically abused Amir, didn't supervise him properly, and talked about possibly selling him or giving him away. She was convicted of unlawful conduct towards a child and sentenced to a maximum term of 10 years. But guess what? She only served 4 years. Authorities have reached out to her multiple times since then, but she hasn't cooperated with them. They stated that she didn't appear to be interested in locating her son. Extensive searches have turned up no sign of Amir, and authorities believe he may be dead. So, his case remains unsolved, and he's still considered a missing person. Now, in 2015, May 2015, Zinah asked for parole when she was in jail before she got released, and she was turned down by the parole board. However, according to the South Carolina Department of Probation, Parole, and Pardon Services, Zinah was given parole sometime in September, and she was supposed to be under a supervised reentry program until March 30th, 2017. Um, to me, this is so wild. When I just heard of this little boy maybe a couple weeks ago. And being that he's from South Carolina, especially Columbia, my best friend stays in Columbia, and I asked her, like, hey, what's the update on him? Have they ever found him? Like, what's going on? And she said they haven't even said anything about him lately, which is really sad. And although I wouldn't want to wish it on anyone, I think baby boy gone. Excuse me. But it's still important to find out where he is, where his body at. Like, she could at least say that. But here's how I came to this conclusion. Okay, yeah, they said that she could have sold this child, but when they picked her up, did they find any money? Okay, she could have gave this child away, but what the fuck was she doing with a shovel? What are you doing with his clothes? What about the blood-stained baby blanket in the trunk? And that was found to be Amir's. You know what I'm saying? Like, the cadaver dog smelling the scent of human remains inside Zanaya's car trunk and her back seat are all red flags to me. And it sounds like to me that she did the worst. And her being quiet and won't say anything about the little boy obviously tells that speaks louder than anything to me, because people usually be quiet and don't say shit when they don't want people to know something. So I think she not I don't think she knows. I know she knows because she did it. I see that they was basically trying to say that the father was also the last person to see the child, but I think it's all on her.
And I just wish she would just say where this child is, although that would never happen because she doesn't want to go to jail again. I can't believe they let her out 6 years early on her 10-year sentence as if she was deserving. She didn't go to jail for self defense. Like, she went to jail for child neglect. Child neglect on a child that no one even knows where this child is. Um, I hope one day it'll come to light. I think that with her being all over the place, her saying that she's in Atlanta when really she's by her mama house in Columbia getting into a car accident and shit. There is no telling where that child is. That child is somewhere buried, and only she knows. I don't think she has a care in the world. If you look on Google at all her pictures, she has this face like, oh well, like you wasting her time, like you're bothering her when she really just needs to produce, this child. It's really wild to me how people will sit there and fight about abortion rights. You want abortion so bad, but you guys you guys don't even access it. Instead, you murder your children or do something to your children. That shit is ridiculous to me. And I'm not saying that I don't support the whole abortion thing. I do feel like women should be able to say what they want to do with their body, but it's just those women who bring children in this world, and it seems like you just bring a child into this world just to make that child disappear. When there's tons of women out there who want children and can't even have children. If you don't want a child, why don't you find out, befriend someone who can't have children and want a child, and sign over your rights to that person? I'm sure they're more fit than you are. I searched social media for this girl, but I couldn't find her. Um, I just want to know how her daughter doing. I hope her daughter's okay because there wasn't no mention of them saying that her daughter was taken away from her or anything. Um, I think those are the only two children that she had. Being that she had schizophrenia and she was taking antipsychotic medication, obviously the bitch is crazy. And it seems like no one was paying attention to what she was doing with this child. It's just an unfortunate situation all around. And I really hope, at least for the grandmother, because she still has hope that that this child is still alive. I hope for her sake that this child is still alive with someone and she's able to reunite. And if that doesn't happen, I really hope that she's able to get closure one day, at least from her own damn daughter, you know. But that's the story of Amir Jennings. Hopefully he'll come back home. Um, But that's the end of the feature missing persons episode. And let's go ahead and go to our advertisement. And we'll be back with our closing statements. Thanks for listening to the Murder Files with me, Buffy Gunner. If you like what you just heard, I hope you'll pass along my website address, illicitdeeds.com, to your family and friends. And please leave us a positive review wherever you're listening. Be sure to share this episode to your timeline and check me out on social media at Illicit Deeds. This has been an Illicit Deeds production. Join me next time for another episode of The Murder Files.